The elevator doors slid shut with a soft chime, the chrome buttons gleaming under the bright lights. I watched my parents fidget in their designer clothes, the same way they always did when they were uncomfortable. My father's Omega watch caught the light as he checked the time for the third time in 2 minutes. My mother's Hermes scarf trailed down her tailored blazer as she adjusted it, her nervous habit since I was a kid. Camila Torres, my mother said, her tone laced with that familiar condescension. Are you absolutely sure you want us to see your workspace? We could just have lunch at the country club instead. I smiled faintly, recalling the countless times they'd refused to visit my tiny rented office back when I started out. But today was different. In fact, they'd practically invited themselves, anxious after hearing whispers at the club about my supposed financial troubles. You'll want to see this, Mom, I said calmly, pressing the button marked Pete for penthouse. Penthouse? My father let out a short, sharp laugh. Sweetheart, I think you hit the wrong button. Your little tech thing can't possibly afford. The elevator began its smooth climb up the Rivera Tower, one of the most prestigious skyscrapers in downtown Miami. 3 years ago, when I walked away from my father's law empire, Torres & Associates, to launch my own fintech startup, they'd been horrified. You're throwing away a family legacy, Dad had thundered. The truth? They never imagined their 29-year-old daughter could survive outside their shadow. Remember that idea I pitched? I said lightly, watching the numbers climb. The one you called absurd? That app you said would never work? Dad scoffed. Don't tell me you're still clinging to that nonsense. Predictive trading. Camilla, that's a hobby, not a career. Mom touched my arm gently, her voice dipped in pity. Honey, your father still has a position waiting at the firm. Junior partner, something stable. Before I could reply, the elevator chimed at the 20th floor. A young executive stepped in, engrossed in his tablet. Then he looked up and froze. Torres, he said, eyes lighting up. I didn't know you were in today. The investor pitch yesterday, absolutely brilliant. My parents stiffened like marble statues. Thanks, Daniel, I said smoothly. How's the beta launch? Phenomenal, ma'am. The algorithm's smashing projections. We've already got 5 major banks negotiating licensing deals. You've started a revolution in the market. He stepped off at the next floor, leaving behind stunned silence. Mom's hand slipped from my arm. Dad's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching near his temple. As the elevator glided toward the top, I could almost hear the gears grinding in their heads, trying to reconcile the daughter they dismissed with the woman about to unlock the penthouse of a tower she owned. The River Tower, Miss Torres, investor pitch. Camilla? My father's voice had lost that confident, patronizing edge. It sounded foreign now, almost fragile. What exactly is going on? The elevator hummed as we continued our ascent. Remember when I told you I had an idea that would change the financial industry? I said, my tone calm, almost conversational. An AI system capable of predicting market shifts better than any human analyst? Dad gave a short, humorless laugh. That ridiculous fantasy? Your words, I said lightly, watching the glowing floor numbers climb. 48, 49, 50. That same fantasy now manages portfolios worth over $60 billion, 0 cents. 60? Mom's voice cracked for the first time. 60 billion? But that's not why I asked you here, I continued as the elevator neared the top. When the company scaled, I needed a headquarters worthy of our growth. And this tower? The elevator chimed. Well, I smiled faintly. Let's just say I got a pretty good deal when I bought it. The doors slid open, revealing the penthouse, an expanse of sleek glass walls framing the glittering Miami skyline. Sunlight streamed across polished marble floors. Modern art installations filled the space, and a massive mahogany desk commanded the center. But it wasn't the view that stole their breath. It was the towering chrome letters mounted behind my desk. Pors Gengel, where AI meets finance. I stepped out gracefully, heels clicking against the marble. Welcome to my building. Mom's composure shattered like thin glass. Your building? All 62 floors? I confirmed, walking toward my desk with deliberate calm. Would you like a tour? We can start with my tiny office right here in the penthouse. Dad's face flushed crimson. But Rivera Tower is owned by Torres Global, I finished smoothly. My company. Named after Abuela Torres, by the way, the one who told me to dream bigger than anyone dared. But that's impossible, Dad stammered. You've only been gone 3 years. 3 years, 4 months, and 22 days, I corrected with a smile. Would you like to see the latest quarterly reports? They're impressive. A knock interrupted the silence. My executive assistant Leela stepped in with a tablet. As Torres, sorry to interrupt, but JP Morgan is on line 1 about the licensing deal, and the governor's office confirmed your dinner for tomorrow. Push JP Morgan to 3. I'll call the governor after lunch, I replied, eyes never leaving my parents. Leela nodded and left quietly, closing the door behind her. Dad collapsed into a leather chair, staring blankly at the panoramic skyline. Mom remained standing, scanning the office like someone searching for proof this wasn't real. But it was real, and for the first time in years, I held all the power. The merger? They're reporting on CNBC? My father's voice had dropped to a whisper. That's you? I leaned back in my chair, savoring the role reversal. For years, I'd sat across from him in his glass office, listening as he dissected my ambitions like they were naive daydreams. Too risky, too unconventional, too different. Yes, I said calmly. That merger. We're acquiring Thomson Financial's AI division. I paused, then added with deliberate softness. Rather fitting, don't you think? Considering they rejected my job application 4 years ago. I tapped the console on my desk, and the holographic display came alive. Rows of glowing financial figures and global charts dancing across the glass surface. Would you like to see the numbers? Mom finally found her voice. But at Christmas last year you said you were still figuring things out. You wore that same old blazer, the one you said made you look like an intern. I smiled, a quiet laugh slipping out. I wore it on purpose. Just like I kept my old apartment, drove that beat-up car, and worked from a tiny office on the 15th floor. I needed to prove, to myself, that I could succeed without leaning on you. Dad's jaw tightened. His business instincts, the ones that built a multi-million-dollar law empire, were finally kicking in. But why hide it, Camilla? Do you realize how many doors we could have opened for you? How many deals? I cut him off, voice sharp as glass. That's exactly why. Every door at Torres & Associates opened because of you. Every client came from your connections. I wanted something that was mine, entirely mine. Mom's voice softened. But surely after the first year, when you started doing well. You mean when I started crushing every projection? I walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay, the city skyline shimmering in the afternoon sun. Let me tell you what happened a year in. Our AI made its first major market prediction, a shift no human analyst saw coming. Our early investors earned a 500% return in a single week. I turned back to face them, heat rising in my voice. And that same week, I overheard you at the club, Dad, telling the Hamiltons how worried you were about my little experiment, how I'd come crawling back for a junior role. Dad's face flushed crimson. We were concerned. No, I said coldly. You were embarrassed. Your Harvard-educated daughter was tinkering with algorithms instead of staying in the family lane. So, I played the part. The struggling dreamer. While building something that's now shaping global finance, I pressed a button and the glass wall behind me erupted into motion. Dozens of screens flashing, real-time market flows, AI-driven forecasts, and ticker symbols for every major financial hub. Our AI doesn't just predict markets, it understands them. It sees patterns humans can't. I let the silence stretch before adding, every major financial institution uses our system now. I held Dad's gaze as the final blow landed, including Torres & Associates. His head jerked up, What? Check your firm's trading software, I said with a calm smile. See who licenses it. I watched his hands tremble as he fumbled for his phone. And trust me, you'll want to hear what I told my father next. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the moment everything changes. You've actually been using my technology for the past year, I said, leaning casually against my desk. Those record profits your firm bragged about at the country club? You're welcome. Dad's head jerked up. That's impossible, he muttered, but the color draining from his face told me he was already piecing it together. The Rivera algorithm, I continued smoothly. His lips moved as if repeating the name in disbelief. That's named after. Anuela Rivera, yes, I finished for him with a small smile. Your chief technology officer was thrilled when he found out who he'd been negotiating with, but I made confidentiality a strict condition of our licensing contract. Mom sank into the nearest chair, her perfect posture collapsing for the first time in my life. She stared at me like she didn't recognize her own daughter. All those nights at the yacht club, she whispered, trying to set you up with men who could support you. Like Peter Thompson? I laughed, a sharp sound that bounced off the marble floor. You mean the Peter Thompson whose company I'm buying today? Yes, those were particularly entertaining evenings. A soft chime interrupted us. Leela's voice came through the intercom, calm and efficient. Miss Torres, the board members are arriving for the quarterly meeting. Also, Mr. Ramirez from Forbes is here for your cover interview. Outside, the faint thrum of helicopter blades echoed across Biscayne Bay, probably business news channels circling for a shot of the Rivera Tower, waiting to report on the biggest acquisition of the year. Dad was still glued to his phone, scrolling through headlines that all screamed my name. Doors of acquire acquirers acquire agencies and agencies in agency and agency. In $18.00 BD. Meet the woman redefining AI in finance. Mom had given up all pretense of composure. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a crack in that flawless image she'd spent decades perfecting. The board is waiting, I said, rising to my feet. You're welcome to stay if you'd like to see how your reckless little girl runs a multi-billion-dollar empire. Camila. Dad's voice cracked, stripped of authority. Your company's valuation, it's 10 times larger than Torres and Associates, I said lightly, as of this morning. The boardroom doors opened, revealing a panoramic view of Miami glittering under the afternoon sun. Inside, the table gleamed, surrounded by some of the most powerful figures in global finance, people who now rose to greet me with respect. Ladies and gentlemen, I said as I entered, my voice steady, commanding. You might recognize my guests, Robert and Elena Torres. They're here to observe. A ripple of knowing smiles swept through the room. In high society, my secret had been well guarded. But in finance, I was no secret. I was a force. For the next hour, my parents sat frozen as I led discussions that would shape markets across continents. Billion-dollar mergers, AI breakthroughs, global economic shifts, every decision flowing through me. As the meeting adjourned and executives filed out with handshakes and congratulations, my father finally spoke, his voice soft, almost broken. Why didn't you tell us? I smiled faintly, savoring the weight of the moment. All this time we thought. You thought what you wanted to think, I cut in, gathering the neatly stacked reports on my desk. That a woman couldn't succeed in finance without following the traditional path. That innovation was too risky. That AI was just a passing fad. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. We were wrong. So terribly wrong. The funny thing is, I continued, walking slowly toward the panoramic windows that overlooked Biscayne Bay. I tried to tell you. Remember? That dinner 3 years ago? I explained how artificial intelligence could revolutionize investment banking. I talked about predictive analytics and real-time algorithms. And what did you do? We changed the subject, Mom admitted softly. To the Hamilton's son and his new partnership, I said with a dry laugh. Dad sighed heavily. I remember. Honestly, I didn't understand half of what you were saying. No, I said, turning to face him. You didn't try to understand. And that's the difference. The intercom buzzed. Layla's calm voice came through. "Mrs. Torres, the Forbes team is ready for your interview." "Give me a moment," I replied. Then I turned back to my parents. "I have a cover story to shoot, but before you leave, there's something you should see." I handed them a sleek black folder. Dad opened it and froze. "You're buying Torres and Associates." His hands trembled as he flipped through the documents. "Market value plus 20%, I said evenly. "You can either join Torres Global as a subsidiary, modernize with our technology and thrive, or keep trying to compete against an AI system that's rewriting the rules of finance." Mom stared at me, her perfectly composed mask cracking. "You'd buy your own father's firm?" "Business isn't personal, remember?" I said, tilting my head. "Isn't that what you always taught me, Dad?" Looked up, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes that had never been there before. Respect. "When do you need an answer?" he asked, sounding more like a CEO than a father. "Take your time," I said, slipping on my jacket. "We'll discuss it over dinner. At my penthouse in the building next door, the one you never visited because you assumed I couldn't afford decent housing." Mom blinked. "You own that building too?" "Among others," I said with a faint smile. "Amazing what you can buy when your AI predicts markets with 99.9% accuracy." Layla appeared at the doorway. "Miss Torres, the photographer is ready." "Coming." I turned back to my parents. "The choice is yours. Join the future I'm building or stay in the past. Either way, I've proven what I set out to prove." As they headed toward the elevator, still clutching the folder, Dad paused and looked back. "That Christmas party, when you wore that old blazer. You already bought this tower, hadn't you?" "Oh, yes," I said simply. "Signed the papers that morning." He shook his head slowly, a mix of pride and regret clouding his face. "We missed so much of your journey." "You did," I said softly, "but maybe now you can be part of what comes next." As the elevator doors slid shut on their stunned expressions, I squared my shoulders and walked toward the waiting camera crew. Tomorrow's headlines would scream my name to the world. But today's victory, the moment my parents finally saw me for who I truly was, felt far more significant. Because sometimes success isn't just in the billions you make or the skyscrapers you own. It's in proving, beyond any doubt, that the dream they dismissed was never impossible. As I posed for the Forbes cover, I thought of that tiny 15th floor office I still keep untouched, a reminder that every empire begins with one room and the courage to believe when no one else does. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have kept your success a secret like I did, or shouted it from the rooftops the moment you made it? Be honest. I'll be reading your thoughts because your perspective matters to me. And if my story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Not just to follow what happens next, but because I believe stories like this remind us that the unexpected path can lead to extraordinary destinations. Your support helps me share more stories of resilience, ambition, and poetic justice. Before you go, here's my advice. Never let someone else's doubts become your truth. The world will tell you what's safe, what's possible, and what's expected. Ignore that noise. Dream big, work quietly, and let your results speak louder than any opinion. If you're building something, whether it's a business, a career, or a better life, don't quit when others laugh. That laugh is proof they don't see what you see. Now, subscribe, comment, and remember, your story isn't over yet. Make it one worth telling.